My nephew called me an easy woman, so we stopped paying for his university tuition that we had been covering. I am 39 and have been married to my husband, Nick, 42, for over 15 years. It's been a very peaceful relationship for me. The only problem we had was due to infertility caused by a medical condition. We couldn't conceive, and it was devastating because we really wanted to have a child. The adoption laws in our state are very complicated, and we both have demanding jobs, so we decided not to pursue adoption. It didn't make sense to adopt a baby and then not have the time to take care of it. Instead, we decided to help children in need, and we took on the responsibility of financing my sister-in-law's children's education. However, a recent incident has made me question this decision and reconsider continuing to support her kids because of their arrogant behavior. A bit of context. My sister-in-law divorced when her children were young, and since then, she has struggled to get by. Her ex-husband was abusive and an alcoholic, and the child support she received was minimal due to his low income. She works 2 jobs, but her limited income makes it difficult to cover their education expenses. That's why my husband and I decided to help. My sister-in-law has 3 children, ABA 23, Ross 20, and Rastin 17. They were once good kids, but it seems like they've lost their way. ABA, her daughter, is a true star. She graduated from university with honors, started her career at one of the most prestigious multinational companies, and is doing incredibly well. My sister-in-law, and honestly all of us, couldn't be prouder. She was always the smartest and sweetest, and it's amazing to see her thrive. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the boys, Ross and Rastin. They were brilliant as children, but when they hit adolescence, they seemed to lose interest in their studies. The situation has become so bad that I felt the need to write about their behavior. It all started to go downhill when Ross graduated from high school. We asked him about the details of his courses so we could plan for his university tuition. He surprised us by saying he didn't want to go to university and instead wanted us to give him the money in cash. My husband asked him what his plan was, and Ross said he wanted to start a business. When asked what kind of business, Ross didn't have a clear answer. He said he had something in mind, but it wasn't concrete. We told him we didn't need a detailed plan, but we at least wanted to know what kind of business he was thinking about. He gave a vague explanation that he wanted to start an online business. My husband and I were skeptical about investing in his project because his idea wasn't clear, and he didn't have the skills for it. We didn't immediately reject his request, but told him we needed some time to think it over. He agreed, but a few weeks later he started pushing us as if we owed him the money. After much back and forth, my husband and I made it clear that we didn't trust his ability to manage the money and wouldn't invest in his project. Ross got furious, but not directly with us. Instead, he went through my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law. His argument was that the university tuition we had set aside for him was his money, and he should be able to do whatever he wanted with it. I found no logic in this sense of entitlement. Yes, we took on the responsibility of funding his education, and we have the means to help financially, but that doesn't mean he should feel entitled to handouts. My mother-in-law tried to convince us to finance his business idea, but my husband said no. We didn't trust his half-baked plan. My mother-in-law argued that we were breaking our commitment to supporting my sister-in-law's children. My husband made it clear that while we would support his entrepreneurial venture, we wouldn't be contributing financially. Not at this time, anyway. Perhaps, in the future, if we gained confidence in his plans, we could help. We also told him we would still be willing to pay for his university tuition if he decided to study again. After that, there was no further discussion. But I later found out that my mother-in-law sold some of her family heirlooms to fund Ross's business idea. God knows what happened, but Ross's business never took off. Since then, we've been distant from them. Then, spring came, and Ross came knocking at our door to apologize for his rude behavior. He said he now intended to go to university and asked us to fund his tuition. His tone was still hostile, but the distance was evident. He used to be friendly and talkative, but now he was only offering brief, courteous exchanges. 2 or 3 months ago, it was Rastin's 17th birthday, and my sister-in-law invited us to dinner. The evening went as usual. Ross was also there but was silent, responding only with nods or one-word answers. Then everything changed when Rustin made a hurtful comment about me. He said, "How could Nick, my husband, find you attractive when you're so average and ugly?" I looked at him in shock and disbelief. He added, "It's hard to believe anyone could find you attractive. I just couldn't process it." Nick exploded and confronted him. The worst part was that before Nick could react, everyone else, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and Rose, laughed at the comment like it was some sort of joke. They only stopped when Nick got angry. My mother-in-law tried to downplay it, saying, "He's just a kid. He was trying to be funny." Nick demanded that Rustin take back his words and apologize immediately. Rustin defended himself, claiming it was just a passing comment, meant to lighten the mood. Nick was furious, insisting that making disrespectful comments about someone's appearance wasn't humor. Rustin kept justifying himself until Nick interrupted, shouting, "You apologize now or face the consequences." The room went silent. I was drowning in embarrassment, anger, and pain. Nick looked at my sister-in-law for support, but instead of reprimanding Rustin for his disrespect, she said, "Calm down, Nick. People can have their opinions." Nick stood up from the table and said, "We're not having any conversation until you all apologize." He gave me a pat on the back and said, "Let's go." I stood up, and my mother-in-law grabbed my hand, saying, "It's his birthday. Don't ruin the moment over something trivial. He's just a kid, but you're an adult, right? You should know how to handle this kind of criticism from kids." I let go of her hand and said, "He's not a kid, and even if he were, it's your daughter's responsibility to teach him manners, but clearly, she's failed." While we were having this conversation, I noticed, out of the corner of my eye, that Rustin and Rose were looking at each other and smiling, clearly enjoying the humiliation they'd caused me. I looked at them and said, "It's not funny. You're cruel, and you'll pay for your behavior." I left before anyone could respond. A week after the incident, I came home and found my sister-in-law and mother-in-law arguing with my husband. I walked in, pretending they weren't there, and went to my room. My sister-in-law asked to speak with me. They both apologized and said they had scolded Rustin after we left, and that he felt guilty for his behavior. I asked, "Okay, where is he? Why haven't I gotten an apology from him?" My sister-in-law said she was apologizing on his behalf. The truth was, Rustin was too proud to apologize, but since they needed our money, my sister-in-law did it for him. Her apology was so superficial that it meant nothing to me. Her argument was that Rustin was just an angry teenager who didn't know his limits, and that's why he got carried away with his humor. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law were so rigid that they'd do anything to defend their kids. But, in the end, my sister-in-law said I should discipline my own children. Her tone, however, said the opposite. I told them it would be better if they controlled their emotions and that this would be the last time they spoke to me that way. Since then, I've been keeping a low profile. Despite the incident, we processed the payment for Ross's next semester. A week later, we attended Nick's grandfather's 75th birthday. My mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and both of the boys were also there. ABA couldn't attend due to work. I wore a dress with a deep neckline. I like wearing off-the-shoulder dresses and ones with plunging necklines. When I made eye contact with the boys, I could feel their gazes, and it made me uncomfortable. They were openly staring at my chest. I felt so disgusted. I mean, they were half my age and they were looking at me like that. But I ignored it and tried to enjoy the evening with everyone else. During the celebration, I made a toast for Nick's grandfather. When I finished, everyone raised their glasses except for the two boys, who exchanged smirking glances. It made me feel so uncomfortable that I wanted to leave right away. A while later, as I passed by them, I felt like they said something and laughed as they looked at me. It was nothing short of harassment. They were acting like street harassers. I had enough, so I decided to confront them. I stopped and asked, "What's the problem?" They were surprised. I asked, "What's so funny about me that you find it amusing every time you see me?" They froze and mumbled a response. I told them, I'm not a teenager who will let myself be harassed by your behavior. Rustin got nervous and stayed silent, but Ross stepped in and said they were just relaxing and their smiles had nothing to do with me. I told them it would be better if they controlled their behavior instead of defending themselves. I turned to leave, not wanting to hear any more. I was just 2 steps away when I heard Ross call me a bitch, and both of them laughed. I immediately turned around, and they stopped laughing, looking uncomfortable. I asked, "What did you just say?" Rustin impulsively started apologizing, saying, "I'm sorry, it wasn't about you. We were looking at something on the phone." I saw Ross grab Rustin's wrist, and Rustin stopped talking. Ross said, "We didn't say anything. Maybe the music was too loud, and you thought you heard something." I lost my patience and shouted, "If you have the guts, repeat what you just said." I was about to slap them when Nick stepped in. I told him what had happened, and he was furious. By then, others had gathered, including my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Ross argued that he hadn't said anything, and I was just making it up. I asked, "If you didn't say anything, then why did Rustin say it wasn't about me?" Rustin changed his story in front of everyone, claiming he only apologized because he thought he had offended me somehow. It didn't make any sense. We had to calm things down for Grandpa's sake since he was getting anxious. We didn't want to ruin his big day. I stayed for dinner, and Nick was constantly by my side, but the rest of the night was awkward. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law kept giving me strange looks. The next morning, ABA called me. She had heard about the incident from someone and felt bad for me. She said I should have slapped each of them immediately and even suggested that we cut off their funding, since they didn't respect the value we added to their lives. While I completely agreed with Nick's decision, she asked what I would have done in my place. Update 1. Thank you all for validating our actions. Nick and I have decided to withdraw the financial support we've been giving them. We haven't been in contact with them since the incident, and Nick said they should come to us first if they want anything. We don't need them, they need us. So we stayed out of touch and they didn't approach us until they needed money. Rustin graduated from high school and wanted to attend a private design university with an outrageous tuition fee. Look at his ego and audacity. Neither my sister-in-law nor Rustin called or visited us. Rustin simply sent Nick an email with his university details and a payment link as if nothing happened. Nick ignored the email. Instead of calling or visiting us, Rustin just followed up by sending a reminder email 2 weeks later. Then my mother-in-law called Nick and said, "Honey, Rustin's been waiting for you to pay his tuition. It seems like you didn't see his email." Nick responded, "Rustin, who? I don't know her." There was a moment of silence, maybe because she was confused by Nick's response. She then asked, "Are you still upset over that trivial matter? Didn't the boys clear up the misunderstanding? I'm sure your wife exaggerated the situation." Nick, tired of all the nonsense, said, "Enough. We've made the decision to cut off their support entirely. We don't know who they are or what they'll do with their lives, and we don't care." My mother-in-law tried to convince him, saying these conflicts shouldn't jeopardize their lives and that we should be more mature and forgive them. Nick simply said, "No thanks," and hung up. Minutes later, my sister-in-law started bombarding Nick's phone with calls, which he ignored. Then she began sending apologetic messages, saying she would make the boys apologize in person, but we shouldn't deprive them of their education. Nick responded that it was too late. They should have realized this much earlier. The next day, my sister-in-law showed up at our door with my mother-in-law. Nick didn't answer them and told them, "We don't welcome disrespectful people into our home or our lives, so it's better if you stay away from us." My sister-in-law started crying, saying she and the boys were sorry for what happened and wanted another chance. Nick asked, "If the boys are really sorry, why didn't they come with you to apologize?" My mother-in-law intervened, saying, "You know the boys are young and hormonal. They don't realize the consequences of their actions, but adults like us should be aware of ours. We shouldn't make them pay such a high price for their childish jokes. Their careers, their lives are at stake." Her defensive tone made me furious, and I told her exactly what she deserved to hear. Calling your aunt a bitch is not a childish joke. It's pure machismo. Then they lied and tried to make me look bad in front of everyone, which was malicious. Commenting on my appearance was tasteless and disrespectful. These actions have consequences, and you play a role in this by allowing that behavior. I'm sorry they'll suffer because their mother did a terrible job raising them. They'll suffer all their lives if they don't change their attitude, and no one but you will be responsible for that. They both scowled and looked at Nick, hoping he'd intervene, but he stood firm and told them to leave. I slammed the door behind them. I don't know if it was the right thing to do, but it's what I did. That same night, ABA called me and praised me for standing up for myself. She said we should have made this decision the first time Rustin commented on my appearance. ABA told me that my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law's mom, had called her a witch for siding with me, but ABA had confronted her. My sister-in-law asked ABA to finance Rustin's university tuition, just like Ross's. ABA lost her temper with my mother-in-law, telling her to stop pampering her children. She told her that instead of defending them, she should hold them accountable for their actions and let them handle things on their own. My sister-in-law then asked ABA to stop acting like my puppet and to support her brothers. ABA replied that she had made her decision and didn't want to be associated with people who embarrass women by calling them whores. This made me reflect on my sister-in-law's character. On one hand, she was begging ABA to help with her daughter, even though ABA had just started her career. How could she possibly take on the responsibility of her brother's education? Why couldn't they get a loan if they were so determined to study, which I doubted very much? Update 2. New information. Let me start by answering a common question from my readers. Many of you asked why we decided to finance these narcissistic kids. Well, they weren't bad when they were children. All three of them were hardworking and well-behaved. My sister-in-law, though not warm or friendly, was at least civil with me. We took responsibility for shaping their lives for a better future. The oldest, ABA, made the most of the opportunity and now works at a multinational company in Europe. But the boys went off track, and my sister-in-law never even tried to correct them. So, after we cut off their financial support, I started hearing many horrible things they said about me. They claimed I wore revealing dresses to compensate for my ugly face, that I was vain and useless, and that I had manipulated Nick into cutting ties with his own family. I took it in stride. My sister-in-law had been cut off from her savings account, so it was natural for her to talk badly about us. I was fine with our decision. Months passed, and one day Nick got a desperate call from my mother-in-law. Ross and Rasten had been arrested by the police for their involvement in illegal drug activities. While Ross was arrested, Rasten was taken into custody for further investigation. My mother-in-law begged Nick to bail them out and save their lives. Nick hesitated for a moment, because after everything that had happened, he wasn't convinced they were completely innocent. Still, it was a matter of their lives. My sister-in-law insisted her sons were innocent and that they had been used as scapegoats by their friends. Nick wasn't fully convinced, but he gave them the benefit of the doubt and went to the police station to get the details. I didn't stop him from supporting his family, but I didn't go with him. My sister-in-law and my mother-in-law were also at the station. The police said it was a non-bailable offense, and they would have to appear in court. Nick involved his lawyer to get the whole story, and the truth came out, exposing my sister-in-law's golden children. It turned out Ross was actually involved in drug-related activities. He was running a network distributing illegal substances to college students and was even planning to expand his network to high school students through Rasten, the younger one. Rasten narrowly escaped a more intense interrogation because he was just a few months away from turning 18. My sister-in-law begged Nick to hire a lawyer for Ross so he could get him out as soon as possible. But after learning the truth, Nick refused to spend his money on him. He said, "Let the judge decide what's best for him." Thanks to my sister-in-law's luck, Ross received a lighter sentence because he was a rookie in the business and had been influenced by a veteran who pulled him into the world of crime. Ross had been seduced by the easy money that came with it. The cost of his bail to get him out before finishing his sentence was incredibly high, and Nick refused to contribute. After that, my sister-in-law openly turned bitter toward us. She even claimed that I had falsely accused Ross to get revenge. And guess what? Some foolish people believed her story. I could only laugh at those who thought they could fool the police and play with state law. My sister-in-law didn't stop there. She even disinherited ABA for defending me and refusing to pay the huge bail for Ross. Currently, Rasten has been released from the correctional facility, while Ross continues to serve his sentence in prison. I'm not sure how their careers or lives will turn out after this incident, but honestly, I don't care at all. Recently, my mother-in-law visited Nick at his office and told him that she was disinheriting him because he had abandoned his sister and nephews when they were at their lowest point. Nick's heart was broken that his mother never appreciated everything we did for her and for my sister-in-law's children. She never defended us, but was quick to disinherit Nick when he refused to help her criminal grandson. We've learned a tough lesson. You can give your life for someone, but if that person doesn't want to see your kindness, they never will. We plan to stay out of contact with them for the foreseeable future. Despite all the problems, we will continue appreciating our good relationship with ABA, who has always been nothing but loving and grateful to us. Update 3. It's been a while since I last updated my story, and I wanted to share how things have been over the past 2 years. I've received many messages of support, advice, and even some criticism, but I'm grateful for everything that has been shared with me. Sometimes sharing our experiences allows us to see the situation from a different perspective. These 2 years have been full of changes, and while the situation with some family members is still complicated, there are others who continue to be a light in our lives. I know my last update ended on a rather dramatic note, but time has allowed many things to settle, even if it hasn't been in the most conventional way. ABA is still that wonderful exception that proves not all the decisions we made were in vain. She's been traveling for work recently, but she came to visit not long ago, and it was a joy to have her at home. She always surprises me with how loving, polite, and grateful she is. Over this time, many people have told me in the comments that perhaps I shouldn't have gotten so involved with my sister-in-law's children, that it would have saved me a lot of headaches. And while they're mostly right, ABA is the exception that shows it was worth it. Every time I see how her professional and personal life has flourished, I feel proud to have been part of her journey. During her last visit, ABA confided in me that if she ever decides to get married, she wants me to be her maid of honor and Nick to walk her down the aisle. I was deeply touched by this, even though she doesn't have any concrete wedding plans yet. She did tell me she's seeing someone, though she didn't want to go into too many details, but she seems happy, and that's the most important thing. She is a testament to the fact that sometimes investing in the right people can be the most rewarding thing in the world. Rasten, on the other hand, has had a much harder path. After everything that happened, he ended up working in a mechanic shop. It's an honest job, and I'm glad he found something that gives him stability, but I can't help but think about how things could have been different if he had made other choices. After his run-in with the law, his educational opportunities evaporated. Even if he had managed to get money for university, which I don't think would have been possible given his family's financial situation, it's unlikely any institution would have accepted him because of his criminal record. In fact, the university that had initially accepted him before everything blew up revoked his admission once they found out about his past. It's sad to see how drastically his future changed, but at least he's managed to find a way to move forward. We haven't had direct contact with him, but I know from others that he hasn't had any more legal issues. As for Ross, his situation is a bit more bleak. He's still serving his sentence and has several years ahead of him before he's eligible for parole. The last I heard, he had been studying in prison. While the circumstances are terrible, I take some comfort in knowing that he's at least trying to improve himself academically. I always thought Ross had potential, but he got lost along the way, seduced by easy money and bad influences. I don't want him back in our lives, but I genuinely hope that this time will help him find his way. Maybe when he gets out, he can find a way to rebuild his life away from crime and bad decisions. After all, I believe no one is completely lost, and I hope he can do something positive with his future. As for my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I don't have much updated information. I know they've tried to contact Nick several times, claiming they want to repair the relationship, but Nick wants nothing to do with them. He made the decision to cut all ties, and to this day he remains firm in that stance. My mother-in-law has apparently insisted several times that we should be the family we once were, but the reality is that idealized family she remembers never existed. There was always an underlying layer of manipulation and unfair expectations. On the other hand, my sister-in-law has tried the same with sporadic attempts to reach out, but Nick has always been very clear that he doesn't want to get involved with her or her children again. For him, the relationship ended the day all the lies and the damage that his own mother and sister were willing to cause to defend the indefensible became clear. We will continue to maintain our relationship with ABA, who is the only one who has always shown gratitude and love toward us.